Welcome to the Ignition Room, an exclusive members club for senior client-side marketing and insight folk with a passion for marketing effectiveness. Today, I'm going to be joined by Giulio del Bufalo, who is SVP Strategy Director at Publicis Imagine. And we're going to be talking about how brands can set themselves up from a marketing effectiveness point of view to better enable agencies to create their best work. Welcome, Giulio. Welcome to the
Thank you.
Ignition Room. Be great if we could start. If you could just tell us a bit about you, what you're up to, what your role is.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Pleasure.
I've been at Publicis in different agencies in different roles for pretty much my entire career, almost 14 years now.
Wow.
First in London and in New York for the past 9. And of those 9, I spent a large chunk working with our old friends at Samsung
Yeah.
in a global role doing strategy for the mobile division. And then just over a year and a half ago, I joined another team working on one of the biggest streaming services. They don't like us to talk publicly about them, but I'll just say they launched very successfully a year and a half ago.
Cool.
And my role has changed a little bit in that it's more of a consulting role because they do a lot of things in-house. So it's been an interesting transition versus Samsung that was very much
Yeah.
sort of a full engagement across creative media, so on and so forth. And in many ways in this role, it's been a combination of getting their awareness and performance teams to work better together because they're quite separate. They're in different locations in the US,
Yeah.
and also offering the best of what the agency has in terms of thought leadership around whether it's future proofing their business as Apple, Google, and everyone else is rolling out new privacy initiatives, or helping them figure out the best way to structure their teams to specific topics like DCO or even things like direct mail, funnily enough. So it's been quite a spectrum of things. So it's been interesting and very relevant to our discussion, I think, because I've seen a lot of the inner workings of in-housing
Yeah.
analytics and measurement. So that's me in a nutshell.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, we should have said we have history of kind of working together on the Samsung business. Whether that is good or bad, that's kind of open to the debate. But definitely a lot of kind of learnings that are
Yeah.
relevant to the conversation today. But in terms of the media agency, because media industry, because we're doing a lot of talking to brands and how they can set themselves up. What's kind of particularly interesting from this space from a media industry perspective?
I think it's a really interesting time because I believe, and this is my personal belief, that we are due a correction. I think over the last 10 years, all of us as an industry got a little bit too drunk on the promise of digital marketing as a perfect way to market and to measure and to finally turn marketing and comms into a perfect science. And I say this not in a judgmental way. I myself have gone through the motions of seeing the promise of targeting down to the individual and of
Yeah.
measuring everything perfectly. And I think we've stepped back, partially due to what Apple's been doing, what Google's been saying. That's woken us up a little bit, and but I think it was going to happen anyways. I think we are recalibrating towards a better balance between sort of the long and short of it, the branding and activation, sort of awareness and performance, and finding a better balance between them. And I think particularly in the realms of targeting and measurement, that's going to bring some changes about. And
Yeah.
so media is exciting because media is where the money is, often in marketing, and that's where by no means marketing is just media or comms. There's a lot more to marketing than that. But media is where a lot of the interaction with consumers happens, and where a lot of creativity comes to life. And I think we also lost some creativity in the last 10 years with our obsession with sort of down funnel and ROI. And so I think it's an exciting time. There's a lot of new platforms like TikTok that are really interesting. There's TV's been dying for years, but it's still not dead. And I think actually technology is making TV a lot more interesting as a medium.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a really exciting time. It's a scary time because I think we all believed we cracked it, and
Yeah.
everything could be measurable, and we could drive it back to sales. But I think I'll close this out, and I think we have to go back to being a bit more comfortable with a level of not knowing everything and trusting our knowledge and our expertise. I'm not saying throw away everything that
Yeah.
we've built, but be a bit more skeptical about anyone who tells you I can measure everything perfectly and know exactly what is doing what, because I don't think that's true.
Yeah, cool. And probably the perfect time then to kind of ask, what does marketing effectiveness mean to you? Because I think it kind of it's meant a lot of different things to different people, particularly with different specialities. But from what you say there, it sounds like things are starting to come together more. So you can't just be a brand marketer or a performance marketer. It's now going to fit in together. But rather than put words in your mouth, I'll let you.
I think marketing effectiveness, first and foremost, is not advertising effectiveness. I think there are a lot of people that equate comms to marketing, and marketing is a lot more than just comms. And I say so as someone who's worked in comms my entire career, and I think marketing effectiveness is fundamentally driving sales for the business and driving revenue, and whether it's through loyalty or acquisition, and you need both, and driving business results. Now, comms are a big component of that, and they're a big driver of marketing effectiveness, but they're not the only aspect of it. So I'd say everything we do needs to drive back to business results, and that's what effectiveness is there's a difference between effectiveness and efficiency, and I think sometimes we mistake the two. Efficiency is obviously much more focused on do it cheaper, do it quicker, maybe. Effectiveness is, are you actually driving results? Then efficiency can be a part of it, but it's not the same thing.
Okay,
that's how I see it.
Cool. Okay, so I guess we've mentioned that you work for Samsung, you've worked for some other kind of pretty big global businesses, sizable businesses. What are the behaviors that you're seeing from them which helps you then get the best out of what you can do from a media agency perspective?
It's a great question. I mean, it's a theme that I think will come out in a lot of things I say, but to me, it's a combination of transparency and real partnership.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger topic for another time, but I think the media agency model needs some rethinking, and a lot of it is on the clients as well. A lot of clients treat media agencies as vendors. Get me the cheapest plans, get me the cheapest media, get me the best short-term results possible at the best cost. And I think while we need to recognize that a media agency can't answer all questions for a client, and sometimes we try to do more than we probably should, and it's not in our expertise to always address everything, I think the best work comes when the client sees you as a partner, and treats you as one. And so trust and transparency go alongside that, because you have to earn it. You have to earn it as a partner. But talking about our years on Samsung, I worked on the same account for almost 8 years, which is pretty much unheard of in our industry, partly because we had that partnership, we had that trust. I sat in on presentations from the design team in Korea, and that's pretty unusual. And you might ask, well, what do you need from the design team to craft a media plan? And actually a lot, because it helps you understand where the client is coming from. When clients have what might seem like an unreasonable request, understanding where they're coming from internally makes it so much easier to deal with. And sometimes they are unreasonable, and we negotiate and we push back. But sometimes they may seem unreasonable, but actually they are under a ton of pressure internally. And if you understand where that pressure is coming from and what's driving that, you can craft a better response. And it makes the work more fun and more interesting, frankly. I think there's nothing I like less than just getting requests with no context, get this to me by tomorrow. And it's a very sort of, menial task. We all have to do menial tasks in our jobs, even when we're senior. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but without the context, without the trust that you're you're brought in and what you're doing amounts to something, I think it just makes the job of immediacy so much harder to do, and frankly, people get burnt out.
Yeah. So I guess the earlier the upstream you can get within the planning process, whether that's within kind of product design, service design, that understanding of why you are being asked what you're being asked to do, that context is really helpful, A, to kind of
Yeah,
generate better ideas, but also to sell the ideas in for the client and give them that kind of understanding.
100%. Because ultimately, you're helping them sell it into to their bosses, right? So
Yeah.
if you understand what they need to do to sell it in better when you're building it for them and selling it to them, it just makes everyone's job easier, I think.
Yeah.
And when it comes to things like effectiveness, and we'll probably talk about it in more detail, but I think it's a trickier one because data is sensitive. There are a lot of things that come into play, but ultimately, without trust, it's really hard. It's even harder in that case. I can come up with a strategy with little from the client because I can do sort of desk research. I can immerse myself in the category and sort of understand the consumer, even without client data, although that
Yeah.
makes it so much more powerful. But measurement, effectiveness, all of that stuff is so much harder without that trust.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean that you might have already answered this then, but is there kind of any particular behavior that really restricts agencies in terms of them being able or setting them up to be as impactful as they could be?
I've touched upon some of those. I think elaborating on that, I've found, and it's sort of inevitable, but it's a big problem that a lot of clients have so many silos.
Yeah.
And let's say, I'm the media client's agency, so other silos immediately distrust me if there isn't a good relationship between the different silos at the client level. That's a problem. And then another problem I think is tied to that and the element of trust, this giving information in snippets and controlling the narrative and not letting your agency really understand why they're doing what they're doing. I get it. It's hard to trust agencies sometimes, and there have been, I'm sure, instances in which clients have it's backfired. But ultimately, there are ways to guarantee that your trust in an agency is protected and it's guaranteed through NDAs and just through knowing what information you can share and how and with whom in an agency as well. So that's a big problem. The other problem I find is when the agency gets hired by, let's say, the CEO or the CMO,
Yeah.
but the reason why they get hired and the reasons why they should be trusted are not really instilled in the teams. And so the to use a Samsung term, the working level teams don't trust the agency and don't see why they're brought in, and it takes much longer then to build that rapport and the relationship
Yeah.
to get good work done. So that said, I think agencies sometimes do things that make clients trust them less, and that's equally a problem, right? And
Yeah.
so I think as an industry, there's a lot of soul searching we need to do, which is hard because we're all running at 1,000,000 miles an hour
Yeah.
and getting things done. But I think it's unfortunately becoming rarer and rarer, the kind of relationship we had on Samsung, because it's short term. People are moving all the time, and I think that's a big issue.
Yeah, I was going to say that because it's not quite as simple as setting the relationship up right from the start.
Yeah.
About kind of maintaining it, which then if you're getting an average life cycle of 2 years of a marketer in role, and you as an agency, Samsung, you talk about being there in 8 years. That's a lot of kind of bringing people on board to what you've been set up and brought in to do versus perhaps new expectations, which could be quite frustrating, I guess.
Very much so, and I think there's also this idea that I get it; it's human nature. But whenever a new senior client comes in, they want to change everything, right? And
Yeah.
and that sometimes leads to the agency getting fired, or sometimes just leads to breaking something that was not broken and trying to fix it with new solutions. And I think that's a bigger topic, but that's another area where I think a lot of brands fall into a trap that they bring
Yeah.
someone in new. Maybe they bring someone in new because they need new energy, but they don't need completely new thinking. So it's tough
Exactly.
because you want to own stuff, right? When you come in. So that's another And it happens on the agency side too. When you bring a new account lead, sometimes they think they have to change everything, but maybe not.
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction, actually, because a lot of what we see, the process of how you generate your kind of your marketing effectiveness process, so from the intelligence, decision making to the activation, that process is often the bit that restricts people rather than the ideas and the execution of that. So yeah, totally agree on that.
I think you're spot on.
Okay, so in terms of then kind of brands in housing, do you think that there's a balance that is a sweet spot between brands doing stuff on their own versus bringing partners in to be able to help kind of deliver effectiveness, tools, capabilities, etc.?
That's a really good question, really big question. I'm going to answer with a bit of a cop-out, but I do believe it should be the answer to most of these questions. It depends. It depends on the size of the business. It depends on the category the business is in. I do believe there should be a balance. I understand brands that mostly in-house, especially when they're smaller.
Yeah.
I've been working more with a brand now that in-houses a lot of things, and it's a very big brand. I've talked to people who work with smaller brands that in-house things, and it's a trend for sure in the industry. And I'm noticing a couple of things. The first thing is there is a benefit to agencies in shared knowledge, whether it's about effectiveness or not, but I think it does apply to effectiveness.
Yeah.
Working in an agency has always been great for me because I can reach out, or a group like Publicis, which is massive and has massive clients, and they run the gamut from a P&G all the way down to a very local small client, is that I can pick up the phone or write an email or I am someone and ask, how are you doing measurement? How are you dealing with attribution? And the common knowledge and the access to common knowledge is incredibly powerful. Because whether it's measurement, or how are you using CTV, or how are you dealing with iOS 14 privacy changes, that incredibly large pool of knowledge of very smart people that naturally work in agencies because they like working on different businesses is pretty invaluable, I think. And so when you in-house to a level where you have no agencies, you lose out on that. Now, there are other ways to bring that expertise through consultants, through doing your own work and trade bodies and that sort of thing. But I do think you miss out on that. So that's one piece where finding the balance between having knowledge completely internalized and then having access to expertise that can source knowledge custom tailored to what your needs are versus just Googling or even just things like WARC or IPA in the UK, right? There's a lot of good knowledge there, but it's white papers and things that you have to interpret versus having an agency that can interpret them for you.
Yeah.
The other piece I would say when it comes to measurement and effectiveness, it's even trickier because sales data, subscription data, that stuff is very sensitive, especially if you're listed. But regardless, you're worried about your competitors having access to that. So that was always a slippery slope, even when there was no in-housing, right? Because the more agencies you have, the more chances of that information traveling exist. But I think that's where the balance needs to be struck because, we may not have the best MMM tool as an agency, and I don't think we should claim we do if we don't. But we may have the expertise and experience from other clients to help you run MMM, and shortcut certain things that we know are going to go wrong before we do them, and sort of speed up the process. But it requires, again, as I said earlier, the trust on your part that you'll share that data with us, or at least let us be a part of that process, whether the data stays with you and never touches our system. That's again, that depends on the setup. So I think we're going to see a lot of it's happening now, a lot of trial and error. For example, in terms of media planning and buying specifically, a lot of agencies are now seeing that they are being tapped by clients who are in-house to help them with just simply talent and staffing, because they're scaling up so quickly. It's hard for them to hire people to do the actual on hands, being in the platforms in Google and Facebook and doing the work. So that's one part of it, but that's a very transactional piece of just helping them staff up. I'm hoping we see a bit of a return to a more balanced strategic use of agencies when it comes even to effectiveness or things like that, because I do believe there's value. There's a lot of talent that doesn't want to work in-house. They like working in agencies. And so how do you still tap into that talent? Tools, I mean, there's a lot of clients that don't trust agency tools, that don't think they're best in class. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes it may be a misnomer. But I think I would like us to get to a point where if you have an agency and you've in-housed a lot of it, you let the agency pitch their tools with the understanding that you'll pick the best ones, and also letting the agency not feel like they have to pitch their tools, because that's where the revenue will come from. And that's a very difficult balance we're going to get to. Again, we're touching on touchier and bigger topics around how agencies make money, and I think it's part of it. I think it's absolutely a part of the discussion. But I would love for us to have, as an industry, a more open discussion. I would stop pitching certain tools that I don't think are right, but I need to know that the revenue model for how the agency is sort of paid for doesn't require me to constantly try to find new revenue from you, and creates that sort of unhealthy relationship. So maybe I'm opening Pandora's box a bit too much, but I think that's a part of it as well.
No, I think it's relevant though, because I think it's particularly in a world where pitches can be more procurement led and more efficiency focused. It doesn't give the skin in the game for the strategy, for the thinking, for that kind of top end of the things, which is harder to measure in terms of quantifying the value of it, but so important in terms of then the value that it gives, the thinking and the impact on effectiveness. So I mean, you're absolutely right then about agencies have to find a way to create revenue, because it can't just be bare bones if it is bare bones. So how do you have a conversation at the setup time to kind of get that all baked in, so you don't feel like you have to sell, you don't feel like it has to be, growth through mismatch in terms of what you're doing? And I think it kind of leads on to the next question I was going to ask, which is thinking specifically about kind of media agencies and MMMs and econometrics. The easy thing to label agencies with who are pitching for it is that you're marking your own homework, which must be kind of hugely frustrating, because as you say, that's where a lot of the expertise is and where the growth in MMMs have come from. So how should agencies react in that kind of context when they're being kind of hit with that stick?
I mean, I think it can be a fair criticism, but it's often unfair in that, again, if you're still, and I don't think, let me think how I want to say this. I don't think that it's fair anymore, because more and more the commission model is going away, right? And I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. I think it's a bit archaic, this idea that, there's a 5% commission on this and a 12% commission on that. And so as a client, you automatically think, well, you're telling me to spend more in digital because that's where you get paid more. And I don't think, I haven't seen it necessarily happen in such a direct way. I think the best way to get rid of that fear and that mistrust is to find other ways to pay your agency fairly, so that it doesn't depend on what channels you're spending in. And frankly, commission-based sort of fees, there's an inherent flaw in that if you're running a $5,000 campaign or a $500,000 campaign, the amount of work is not exponentially multiplied in the same way. A $5,000 campaign can be a lot of work, and so so that, putting that aside, that I think is a big reason why clients think you're grading your own homework, because you're telling me to spend more where you make more money. I believe that's where most of the mistrust comes from. There's also mistrust in that you're grading your work, in that you're telling me that the campaigns you're running on my behalf are doing great. So that's more about attribution and campaign measurement. Maybe that's about MMM, although there's probably some of it in there too. And I think, again, that's easily dispelled by how we track performance, but ultimately also, what does success look like? If success is, and sometimes it needs to be, but I think we're overinflated that side of the business, as I mentioned early on. if success is only a CPA or a return on ad spend in very sort of short-term myopic ways, then yeah, sure. I mean, that's what we're gonna over-invest in, but that's not an agency problem. That's an industry problem, I think.
Yeah.
And so if the client isn't able to, and I'm not saying it's easy, and I have empathy for clients, because when your finance director says, you're doing great with the Google, Facebook, search, your CPAs are great. Why are you not spending more money there? And it's human nature for me to say, you're right, I can demonstrate more success more easily there, I should spend there. And it's much harder to demonstrate success through brand campaigns, although we know there is a ton of evidence that they are responsible for the CPA down the line.
Yeah.
So I think the way agencies should really tackle that question is in the remuneration model. It's in building, again, that trust with the client, that our recommendations are really strategic and they're based on helping your business grow. And then you collaborate.
Yeah.
The process of running an MMM has to be open, has to be, as much as possible. There are proprietary technologies that, agencies are scared of opening to clients, because, and sometimes clients, not with agencies, but I've seen clients work with a MMM provider and then 3 years later bring it in-house, and that MMM provider's business is hit badly. So with that in mind, but openness and guaranteeing and taking the client through your models to show that they are best in class, that they are actually designed to give you recommendations based on what's right for your business and not based on what's right for the agency. I think that's the way, and it's complicated. I'm not saying I'm by no means a modeling expert, so I'm sure if somebody who sees this interview, they won't be happy with what I'm saying. But I think there are ways to get to a place where the client is satisfied with what the model does and how it does it, and not feel that it's tweaked to make the agency look better.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, I like what you're saying there, kind of in that initial bit around the fact that the client has responsibility in making sure that you are set up for success. And that means making sure you aren't just remunerated on measures that are efficiency driven. So take it back up to business performance, because then that creates a true partnership level. Is that if a slice of agency remuneration is based on how the business is performing, knowing that media is just one lever that you can pull to do that, then actually there's a lot more accountability on both sides to do that. And then I think it probably then becomes easier when agencies do the modeling side of things. If you're opening things up, then you can see how it all works, and it suddenly kind of puts media agency in a position where you're not just looking at media, but if a client trusts you, you could look at the impact of pricing within that, or distribution, or whatever that looks like,
which would be amazing, and the correlation between them and things like that. And I think it's really hard. I don't blame clients. Sometimes clients have really ridiculous setups, and that's a problem, and some clients just don't see it, and I think that's an issue that should be tackled. Other times it is the financial pressure on the marketing department, and the marketing department is often reduced to comms, really, right? They don't have impact on pricing or in distribution, and that's taken away from them. And that's, again, a much larger topic, but it has, the last 10 years, I think, have eroded a lot of trust in marketers, because in some ways we drank the Kool-Aid and told our CFOs we can deliver guaranteed results through media and it's going to be amazing. And they bought it, and why wouldn't they? In other ways, I think we haven't been able to also collectively as an industry have them see the value of the things we've done for 30, 40 years, like TV campaigns and long-term campaigns, which can be measured. Just because they're measured in the same way for decades doesn't mean that they're not measured. And I think that's a big misnomer as well. So I understand the place that agencies are in is often partly our own doing, but partly because marketing departments are under an immense pressure. And so at the end of the day, they have to launch way too many campaigns with way too many creatives. And they have to track everything. And there's no time to rethink the industry or to rethink how we do things. But I honestly believe that we need to, because ultimately, if you put in the work, it'll help the businesses grow, versus media being just a cost and marketing being a cost versus being an investment, which is what it should be.
Perfect, cool. Right, I'm going to hit you with one last question then, because I think we've covered a lot, and there's probably a lot that we could keep diving back
Yeah.
into and go into more detail. But I guess, what would be the one non-negotiable for you, and how kind of brands work with agencies to help you get the best out of what you can offer?
I really believe, I mean, again, I'll go back to the word trust, but in a more tangible way, I think you have to have a process, a very clear and open process that starts with good briefs, and it gives time to the agency to deliver good recommendations, and then the agency should be evaluated on the right things. And so I know it's a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but it's not one non-negotiable, but it is around having a fair process for both parties,
Yeah,
that's documented, that's very clear. A lot of clients don't brief, don't have brief templates, don't understand the value of briefing. They often just brief you in an email or on a phone call. And ultimately, they don't understand that that's detrimental to them, because we can only, garbage in, garbage out, whether it's bad data in, bad data out, whether it's a bad brief in, you get a bad plan. So I think if I were to sum it up to one non-negotiable, it's have a very clear and agreed upon process that gets respected. And that we are, on our agency side, we are accountable to. If a plan takes 2 weeks, we will deliver a good plan in 2 weeks. But you, client, also have to give us those 2 weeks to deliver that plan, and have to brief us properly. And so within that, you have KPIs that are agreed upon. So it really, it isn't one thing, I know, but I think encapsulated in a process, I would say that's with strong KPIs that both parties, or all parties, frankly,
yeah.
are happy with, and will stick to.
Okay,
That's something I would say.
cool. So we'll call the one negotiable, non-negotiable, the process.
Yeah. Let's. It's not sexy, I know, but it would make such a difference in many
Yeah.
cases.
Okay. Well, I mean, that is brilliant. Thank you so much for taking
Of
us
course,
through
Nick.
that. I think, as you said, it's a fascinating topic. There's a lot more that we could cover within that. So really appreciate you taking your time, taking us through that. So
My
thank
pleasure.
you very much, Giulio.
It's great seeing you.